Good morning, I'm Dr. Yasmin Magdi, and today we are going to discuss the part 2 of chapter 4 on course Auditing 1. Last lecture or previously we discussed audit evidence, and we said that audit evidence is the backbone of the audit process. Today we are going to discuss audit documentation, and we will know what is the difference between audit evidence and audit documentation. First, let's know what is the meaning or what is the definition of audit documentation. Audit documentation is the record of the audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence, and conclusions that the auditor reached. Audit documentation should include all the information that the auditor considers necessary to adeptly conduct the audit and to provide support for the audit report. Audit documentation may also be referred to as working papers or work papers, although audit documentation is often maintained in computerized files. يبقى الاوديت documentation هي ريكورد على كل الاجراءات وكل الايفيدنس وكل الكونكلوجنز اللي الاوديت وصل لها. اوكي، يبقى كل الانفورميشن الاوديتور needed to adopt or to conduct audit and to provide audit report or to provide audit opinion names audit documentations. Sometimes we call it as working papers or work papers. خلاص، ممكن تكون الاوديت دوكيومنتيشن موجوده بطريقه كمبيوترايزد على الكمبيوترايزد فايلز. اوكي، طيب why I need to have or what is the objective of having audit documentation? The overall objective of audit documentation is to aid the auditor in providing reasonable assurance that an audit was conducted in accordance with auditing standards. More specifically, audit documentation provides a basis for planning the audit, a record of the evidence accumulated and the results of the tests, data for determining the proper type of audit report, and a basis for review by supervisors and partners. First of all, a basis for planning the audit. يبقى دي الفور objectives أو ال purposes of audit documentation. أول حاجة a basis for planning the audit. If the auditor is to plan an audit, the necessary reference information must be available in the audit files. The files may include such diverse planning information as a descriptive information about internal control, a time budget for individual audit areas, and audit program and results of the preceding year audit. يبقى احنا بنستخدمها ل planning the audit. Number 2, a record of the evidence accumulated and the results of the tests. Audit documentation is the primary means of documenting that an adopt audit was conducted in accordance with auditing standards. If the need arises, the auditor must be able to demonstrate to regulatory agents and courts that the audit was well planned and adeptly supervised. The evidence accumulated was appropriate and sufficient, and the audit report was proper considering the results of the audit. يبقى احنا الريكورد الاوديت دوكيومنتيشن هدفها من احد اهدافها انها تقول ان الاوديتور عمل الديو كير، بروفيشنال ديو كير، يعني هو بذل العنايه المهنيه الواجبه. بتوضح لي الايفيدنس اللي هو accumulated، التستنج اللي هو عملها، ان الايفيدنس كانت appropriate و sufficient. كمان بتوضح لي ان الريبورت كان دقيق، وان احنا اخدنا كل الاعتبارات او considered all the conditions when we planning and doing field work بتاع الاوديتنج. خلاص. Number 3 of the objective, data for determining the proper type of audit report. Audit documentations provide an important source of information to assist the auditor in deciding whether sufficient appropriate evidence was accumulated to justify the audit report in a given set of circumstances. The data in the files are equally useful for evaluating whether the financial statements are fairly stated given the audit evidence. And final objective is a basis for review by supervisors and partners. The audit files are the primary frame of reference used by supervisory personnel to review the work of assistants. يبقى احنا الاوديتور بيستخدمها عشان يتاكد ان الاسيستنت عملوا الشغل بتاعهم. دول الفور purposes why you have audit documentation. طيب, based on this, who should keep the audit documentation, the auditor or the client? This is the question you have to think about, and we will answer it at the end of the lecture. Now we will discuss forms and content of working paper or as we called audit documentation. Each CPA, and we say that CPA is the auditor, firm establish its own approach to preparing and organizing audit files, and the beginning auditor must adopt the firm's approach. First one is permanent files. What is the meaning of permanent files؟ أو احنا بنسميها الملف الحالي أو الثابت اللي هو ما بيتغيرش، الدائم، ملف الدائم ما بيتغيرش خالص. What is the meaning of permanent files? Permanent files contain data of historical and containing nature partners to the current audit. These files provide a convenient source of information about the audit that is of continuing interest for year to year. يعني البيرمننت فايل دي فايلات فيها داتا، الداتا دي ما بتتغيرش بشكل دائم، مش من سنة للسنة. تمام؟ طب ايه الداتا اللي ممكن تكون ما بتتغيرش من السنة للسنة؟ اوكي، مثلا على سبيل المثال extract or copies of such company documents of containing importance as articles of incorporations, bylaws, bond interests, contracts, analysis for previous years of accounts that have containing important auditors. عنوان الشركة ما بيتغيرش، تركيبة هيكل الستراكشر بتاعها ما بيتغيرش، اللونج تيرم كونتراكتس بتقعد اكتر من سنة. اوكي تمام. كمان information related to understanding internal control assessing control risk، برضو دول ما بيتغيروش from year to year. كمان results of analytical procedure from previous year audits، دي بتبقى فيه permanent files. يبقى permanent files او الملف الدائم ده بيبقى فيه كل الداتا اللي ما بتتغيرش من السنة للسنة. يعني as an auditor هتفضل معايا الداتا دي، مش هديها مش هتتغير الفايل ده ممكن، بس معنى ذلك ان انا لازم اعمل updating للفايل after 4 years، يعني مش لازم كل سنة اغيره. اوكي this is the first form or the first content of permanent files. اوكي second part is or second form is الكارنت فايلز بقى. من اسمه كده الكارنت فايلز هو الملف الجاري. الكارنت فايلز بقى ده بيكون ريليتد بالاوديت اوبجكت او الاوديت بروسيس بتاعت السنه، يعني المفروض ان هو كل سنه انا بغيره. اوكي يبقى it's change from year to year، يبقى it change every year or each year's audit. Okay, the current files include all audit documentation applicable to the year under audit، يبقى related بالسنه اللي انا بشتغل عليها دلوقتي. There is one set of permanent files for the client and set of current files for each year audit. يبقى انت لو بتعمل permanent file واحد بتبقى كل سنة بتراجع نفس الكلاينت، هيبقى كل سنة ليها current file. Okay, the following are types of information often included in the current file. الاوديت بروجرام بتاعك، البرنامج المراجعة، الاوديت البروجرام اللي انت هتمشي عليه، الوركينج ترايل بالانس عندك اللي هو الترايل بالانس او ميزان المراجعة اللي بتشتغل عليه، adjusting and reclassifications entries، supporting schedule. كل الحاجات دي كلها بتتغير from time to time from year to year، فاحنا كل الحاجات دي بنعمل بيها. يبقى انا لو انا بعمل auditing for 2020 يبقى انا هعمل current file one permanent file، لو انا الكلاينت ده انا بشتغل معاه قبل كده one permanent file، وبعمل current file لل 2021 يبقى هعمل current file 2021 for the same client have one permanent file. اوكي الثيرد بارت او الثيرد فورم يبقى انا عندي 3 فورمز للوركينج بيبرز، البيرمننت فايل والكارنت فايل. خلينا بقى نشوف الثيرد بارت هيكون ايه او الثيرد فورم هيكون ايه. الثيرد تايب بيكون او الثيرد فورم هو النوتس الاوديت، النوتس اللي بيعملها الاوديتور. sometimes بيكون في different opinion او different point of view او different analysis for the transactions between the auditor and the management. The auditor have to document these differences, this difference of point of view. لازم يسبورت his opinion ويقول الconditions أو الsteps أو conclusions اللي حصلت نتيجة difference between his opinion and the management opinion. يبقى there's difference between two management and auditor in some kind of transactions. The auditor have to support or the auditor have to documenting this difference and should document the actions taken towards this difference in point of view. يبقى بيكون في بعض الأحيان دي بنسميها دفتر الملاحظات. في بعض الأحيان بيكون في اختلاف في وجهات النظر ما بين الإدارة وما بين المراجع في بعض المعالجات المحاسبية، فلازم المراجع يكتب الموضوع ده أو يدوكيومنت الموضوع ده ويقول احنا أخدنا فيه إجراءات قد إيه. تمام؟ ده كده الفورمز والكونتنت بتاع الوركينج بيبر. I asked a question previously, what is working paper should be documenting, should be keeping or saving in the auditor office or saving in the client office. Let's answer this question. أنا قلت لكم فكروا, think about these questions and I will answer it at the end of the lecture. Now it's time to answer. احنا بنقول ان audit documentation is owned or owned by the auditor, is owning by the auditor. It's belong to the auditor, هي للauditor, so he have to save it, to have to keep it in his office. Okay, no one but the auditor have the right to see this or reading this documentation because it's evidence about the quality of the auditing process. خلاص يبقى ما فيش حد, دي بتفضل في مكتب الاوديتور, محدش بيقدر يطلع عليها غير الاوديتور لانها دليل على جودة المراجعة. Even the client employees or even the next auditor or the new auditor can see this documentation but with the permission of the client. ما يقدرش اي حد يشوف الدوكيومنتيشن دي الا باذن العميل. تمام؟ ودي دليل زي ما قلنا على جودة عملية المراجعة. والauditor have to keep it in his office and have legal responsibility to keep it in secret. No one have to look to these documentations. Okay? Now we achieved the end of our lecture, and with this lecture we finished chapter 4. I will finish what we discussed in chapter 4. We discussed chapter 4 in the previous lecture, audit evidence, and we discussed now audit documentations. We said that the difference between audit evidence and documentation, that audit evidence supports the auditor opinion and it belongs to the client, but the audit documentations belong to the auditor and support the professional due care that the auditor do his task as good as he can. Okay, and he followed all the rules and regulations related to his work. Okay, now we finished our lecture. Thank you for your time.